What if I were to tell you that an alien life form exists here on Earth today? Not only that, what if I told you that this alien is able to adapt to a new environment, is able to identify human beings even if they're all wearing identical clothing, and when you put this creature in captivity, it seems to be aware that it's in captivity. With characteristics like this, questions such as, are they conscious? Or do they have some type of subjective experience arise? These are the types of deep questions that scientists, philosophers, as well as viewers of this Dr. Smith Academy lesson will be closer to answering. Now, I'm sure you're imagining some type of archetypal alien creature that's depicted in Hollywood movies, but I'm actually talking about some of our very distant relatives, the cephalopods. These are a phyla of animals that includes the octopi, squid, and cuttlefish. Before we can begin answering the question of why we are classifying these animals as aliens on Earth, we first need to take a look at the beginnings of life on Earth itself. Life on Earth began around 3.8 billion years ago with a simple single-celled organism that existed in the ocean. While primitive, these cells were able to communicate with one another. To do this, they had rudimentary receptors on the surface of their cell and were able to detect metabolites or byproducts given off by other cells, as we can see in this diagram I've drawn over here. This ultimately developed into two very important concepts. Firstly, the basis for communicating between cells allowed for communication of cells within a multicellular organism. This is the concept we call multicellularity. Moreover, the communication of these primitive cells allowed for the development of the nervous system. The nervous system is responsible for almost everything we do, from thinking about how to procrastinate on a project to our dreams at night and everything in between. We know how important it is, but what makes it so unique? Well, there are three things that makes it special. Firstly, signals are sent very fast. Some of the top speeds of these signals can reach up to 268 miles per hour. Secondly, signals are targeted and they can be very distant. Third, and most importantly, it is very expensive to build and maintain a nervous system. For example, our brains weigh on average 3 pounds, yet they take up 20% of all energy used in the human body. Now that we know the what of the nervous system, a very important question to answer is why? Well, we have developed two different theories to help explain its presence. First, in the small space I have down here, we have something called the sensorimotor concept. Basically, what this means is that organisms detect stimuli in their environment and react accordingly. This theory states that the nervous system is basically the connection between stimuli and response. In contrast, the second theory is called the action shaping view. And believers in this theory think that the first theory was actually too simple. The nervous system, according to the action shaping view, creates coordinated action. To better explain this concept, think of the nervous system as the coxswain in a boat that tells all the rowers when to row. The coxswain, or the nervous system, coordinates the activity of all the rowers or muscles within the organism to properly respond to stimuli. Now that we know the basics of what a nervous system is, why it is needed, and how it formed, we can begin to talk about the cephalopods. We have dubbed them aliens on Earth because they were able to independently develop their own nervous system that is structured almost completely different than our own. Philosopher Michael Trestman coined the term complex active bodies, abbreviated to CAB, which describes cephalized animals that are aware of their environment. And a cephalized animal just means an animal that has a brain and their sense organs localized to their head. Oddly, there are three phyla that develop these CABs. One, we have the vertebrates, which includes us. We have the arthropods, which includes like honeybees and ants. And we have the cephalopods. Despite having a completely different evolutionary history for the past 600 million years, evolution has created two nervous systems with some similarity. For instance, when we compare the nervous system and the brains of cephalopods to humans, we can see one, a very detailed camera-like eye, which gives us and them very high visual acuity. We both have the capacity to learn. We both have short and long-term memory. We both have this curiosity or play with non-food objects, and both humans and cephalopods have been shown to have facial recognition of other humans. A lot of our understanding of cephalopod intelligence comes from both anecdotes and observation during study. Compared to other animals their size, cephalopods have a significantly larger brain compared to their body, something called the relative brain size, a decent marker for intelligence within species. Their brains have around 500 million neurons, which is also around the same number of neurons a dog has. The increased number of neurons, however, does not necessarily equate to a smarter animal, so let's look at some examples of their intelligence. Peter Godfrey Smith, as well as researcher David Scheel, both experienced octopi that waited until the octopus is no longer being observed to try to escape, as if the octopus was aware of its captivity. Moreover, we have seen countless examples of octopi recognizing certain lab members and squirting them with a water jet whenever they walked past them due to no obvious reasons. Most surprisingly, cephalopods have been shown to manipulate their own environment for their own benefit. An example of this includes the assembly and disassembly of a coconut shell to use as portable shelters and movement devices when they see fit. While other animals, like chimps, can create tools and manipulate their environment, they do not disassemble the tools, carry them around, then put them back together when they are needed. From examples like these, we are beginning to get a sense of the cephalopod's curiosity and flexibility in thought, which could have provided the cephalopods a route to this heightened intelligence. Despite some similarities and a shared sense of curiosity, the cephalopod nervous system is set up almost completely different than ours. For example, in humans, the vast majority of our neurons are located in our brain, yet for octopi, there are 2 times as many neurons in their arms and in their brain. As a result, the arms or the tentacles experience considerable independence, a concept that we cannot even begin to comprehend. Even stranger, their esophagus esophagus passes right through the middle of their brain. Any sharp object that punctures the esophagus also punctures their brain. The nervous system is also significantly less centralized, with the development of something that we call a ladder-like organization of ganglia. While we have a very centralized brain with nerves running throughout the body for movement and sensation, cephalopods have ganglia, little knots that run across the body and are connected to each other for the development of movement and sensation. Getting a better grasp of their intelligence, curiosity, and evolution leaves us with a final question. Are they conscious? Do they have a sense of subjective experience? While these questions are very difficult to answer, scientists and philosophers are working together to try to come up with an answer. When trying to define where on the conscious spectrum an animal falls, it makes sense to first define the terms. Subjective experience is basically what it feels like to be that animal, what it feels like to be a bat, for example. Are they able to feel pain? Do they experience it in the same way that we do? One way to assess if they have a subjective experience is to look at their reactions to pain. For example, when octopi are bit in nature, they exhibit human-like reactions, such as a startled jump and flailing limbs. They even tend to their injured body parts, and if the damage is too severe, the animal decides to self-amputate, showing an indication of pain. Another example is the fact that cephalopods have something called perceptual constancy, which is the ability to identify objects despite a changing viewing condition. When presented in the original literature, this was just a small note at the end of a paper, but this small detail entails that these complex nervous systems are able to interpret external stimuli as truly being external, a fact that is much easier said than done. Trying to assert an animal is conscious, however, is very difficult. While no definitive answer has been made on whether or not they are conscious, there are two theories we can investigate in order to get a better appreciation of the development of consciousness itself. First, we have the latecomer view. Which states that this waking up or this advent of consciousness came very late in the history of life and is simply due to the features we see in animals like us. In effect, this theory entails that the only animals that are conscious are the ones that are modeled like us. In contrast, however, we have another theory called the transformation view. The transformation view that believes that a form of subjective experience preceded late arising mechanisms such as working memory and the integration of senses, two topics that you will be able to discover more if you continue your education in neuroscience. The transformation view assumes that no inner model of the world is needed to feel the pain associated with extreme thirst or the loss of breath, for example. The material brought to you in this lecture was all taken from the novel Other Minds, The Octopus, the Sea, and the Deep Origins of Consciousness by Peter Godfrey Smith. There is much more material on cephalopod color perception, or lack thereof, evolutionary rationale for maximal lifespan, and other interesting topics bridging the gap between neuroscience and philosophy. If you take anything from this Dr. Smith Academy lesson, I hope it is a deeper appreciation for neuroscience and hopefully something to look forward to studying during your academic career.